All right, and welcome to another podcast episode with me, Angie Rishfader. I am going to be talking today about one of the biggest pitfalls I see with caregivers on a routine basis. And it's something that's not talked about often, and it's such a simple thing, but it's your feelings as a caregiver. So, I'm going to give a little story here of something that recently happened in one of my home care visits with a really nice couple who's been battling all types of medical issues over the course of, I'd say, about 20 years. And I saw just little fragments of what I believe exist in most situations, whether it's a relationship like a couple or whatever it may be. It's a buildup of emotions and feelings that people don't really know what to do with, especially the caregiver. And I'm going to speak from a personal perspective as well, because I've been in this situation with my husband, who has had episodes of requiring care and not being himself, being weak, being unable to participate in the lifestyle that we had before. And it's a real challenge. And if, to be honest, when you have feelings personally as a caregiver, or a support person for this individual that's going through a hard time medically, you almost feel guilty about having feelings of any kind. So I recognize them, I'm sensitive to them, and I just want to encourage people to deal with them a certain way. So it's simple. First, you have to recognize your feelings, you have to be honest about them. And it takes a little bit of time. You've got to reflect on what is going on with your emotions. So in regard to a couple that I worked with in the past couple of weeks with a very lengthy duration, 20 years of chronic illness, what I saw was a very attentive caregiver and a very dependent patient or loved one. She does what she can, but requires a lot of care. So caregiver had set up everything you can imagine to be supportive, but at the same time I sense that common overwhelm that exists with the caregiver and the little twinges of resentment. And so I'm going to speak specifically to this one because this is the one that I can relate to the most. And I recently talked about it in a Facebook group that I've created. So head on over there if you're looking for support and a place to comment. It is on Facebook, and it is called Caregiver Therapeutic Support. So Caregivers Therapeutic. Oh my goodness, I hope that's right. I've renamed it a couple times, so I'll put it in the comment section. But the most common, I believe, feeling people experience is resentment. So when I had resentment for what? Well, you know what? It's not like I had to do a whole lot as a caregiver during the times that my husband was ill. But what I struggled with multiple times over the course of 20 years is just not having my normal life, not being able to experience my everyday life the way it had been before. And when I was younger, I certainly didn't deal with it well, and it took me a really long time to get to a place where I dealt with it appropriately. And how did I do that? So one, I didn't recognize it and admit to it as soon as I should have. So that was the first step, recognizing your feeling. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time. You really have to go with your gut. Like, what do you feel? And then dig down a couple more layers. Ask yourself why. Try to connect it to something like, while people say, well, I don't really feel, I'm just tired. Yep, you're tired, and that's a physical feeling, and it can also be an emotional feeling, but like really what's behind that feeling? You just kind of keep going until you can't go any further. So like I said, resentment was one, and that I felt, and what I saw in particular just this last couple weeks with a couple. Because what happens is as the caregiver or support person, you're constantly needing to be present and available and able to help. and you still are trying to do your life, right? So you're trying to get your life going, you're trying to work, you're trying to do whatever, but then that person calls your name or buzzes, you, or uses Alexa to call you or text you, or something, because they need a glass of water or they need to go to the bathroom. And so it's just kind of a constant sort of interruption. And that might be okay for people for a little while, but I don't know who doesn't over time develop a feeling of like eye rolling resentment. So what do you do with that feeling? Because the situation isn't going to go away. Your level of caregiving, if anything, most times increases the need that person has for you. So tip 1, recognize it, admit it. You got to spend some time recognizing it, digging it out. 2, write it down, own it. Okay, I feel this way, and I know I'm not alone, because believe me, you're not alone. And the next step would be to really kind of dive into that. Really start writing about your feelings every day. And don't be afraid to write how you feel. Genuine journaling, type it out, record yourself, speaking into it, draw, however you want to express yourself. That emotion needs to come out. You need to kind of compartmentalize it, find a way to own that thing. Because when you don't, it just builds up and it starts like, I picture it like this little tumor with feeder bands that just starts attaching itself to all these different areas of your life, and it overflows and affects the person that you're taking care of. And then you've got this like push and pull thing going on, and negativity breeds negativity. One of the things I love to remember is this saying that the more you focus on something, the more you create of it. So what you focus on, you create more of. You can remember it either way, but it is the truth. So if you continue to feel a feeling of resentment, but not recognize that that's what it is, and you just keep feeling it all the time without doing something about it, it's going to continue to produce itself in your life. What's the alternative? The alternative is to feel it, recognize it, and then say, what can I do about it? So you've got to take ownership of it and come up with a plan. So in terms of caregiving, one of my tips to, for instance, this couple specifically was, all right, I'm noticing that the biggest issue here is when you're going to the bathroom. Like, you have to help your wife get to the bathroom, and every time you do it, it takes so long, and it's physically exhausting. It's stressful because it's scary. The situation, the mobility portion of it was scary, and you're adding one layer on top of another of stress and time consumption, and it just creates resentment. So let's just pick one task that creates this feeling and see if you can analyze that task, break it down to some way that's going to make it easier for the both of you. So my job as the occupational therapist that day in that session was, let's figure out how to minimize the stress on the caregiver and the loved one while meeting the goal of getting to the bathroom. So typically in the therapy world, we work very hard on maximizing an individual's independence, their functional mobility, their strength. But sometimes the mission needs to be take care of the person's soul and their caregiver, because they're directly related. And so on this day where this person's goal in my book as the occupational therapist, in my documentation, get clinical here, was for them to be able to walk to the toilet and ambulate themselves there using a walker and manage their clothing. And I mean, this is the goal. And in this session, because this person had been experiencing a difficult day, it had been 2 days of a decline, we had to ditch that goal temporarily and say, we just got to figure this out so that we continuously get to the bathroom with less stress and maintain the relationship that you're having with your spouse on a good note. And so that's what we did. So what did that mean? That meant that for a couple days, I rearranged the bedroom and pathway to the bathroom so that he could get her from point A to point B in a wheelchair. And I told him, this is temporary. Don't focus on this as being a setback. Don't let this wheelchair define you. It doesn't mean that your mobility is decreasing, but instead use your mobility for something else. So instead of using up all your energy to get from point A to point B to toilet, and in the meantime you're all stressed out and frustrated and your husband's yelling at you and you're getting upset with him, and really he's only yelling because he's scared and he's frustrated, but then it's adding aggravation to the situation and likewise causing a resentment issue for the spouse. Let's take all those things away and instead sit in a wheelchair for the 2 minutes it takes to have him get you to where you're going and utilize a different form of mobility. So now instead of, the walking aspect, you're being wheeled there, but guess what? Now you have energy to stand longer and manage your clothing where he was doing that before. So we're talking about pushing down, your underwear, pulling up your dress, even if it's with one hand, and he's helping you with the other. It's a constant balance of trading one thing for another. And you can't lose sight of that. You cannot lose sight of the task and what is the purpose of the task. And my point here being that in all tasks, in all interactions between caregiver and loved one, it needs to be, your relationship needs to be the foundation. So don't destroy a relationship in an effort to get something done or to meet a need, a daily need. Toileting, bed mobility, getting in and out of a car, you've got to maintain your relationship first and then apply what assistance you can in areas where it's not going to cause excessive stress to you. So being a caregiver is a huge job. It really is, and God bless you all who are doing it. I know that caregivers don't get credit. I've been guilty of it myself as the occupational therapist that walks in to a patient's home and I'm working with the patient and I'm figuring out what their needs are and how I'm gonna maximize their independence and what equipment they need. And then a lot of times it's our fault too for focusing so much on medical requirements and medical necessity of the patient that we're not involving the caregiver and making the caregiver a goal and a portion of the goal. And my clinical life has changed when I did that, and I truly believe that it has maximized the beneficial outcome of my patients and increased the quality of life of the caregiver and the patient. So this is just a brief touch on that. What to do with your feelings, recapping here, recognize them. If you can't quite put your finger on what is your biggest feeling, I mean, that sounds very juvenile, but come on, there's multiple feelings going on. What's the one that's taking up the most space? If you can't right away figure that out, take some time to do it. Get a piece of paper out. Start trying to, connect the dots between your emotions. There's different ways to do that. Second, own that it's there. Start recognizing it. And when you're feeling it, come up with an alternative. So you're going to recognize it as, today we talked about resentment. You're going to stick it in a box and you're going to go, yep, I'm feeling resentful about this thing. This thing is really whatever. There it is. What am I going to do about it? So I've got this feeling of resentment about this specific situation, taking this person to the toilet. Drives me crazy that, takes 20 minutes of my time and I feel like my person's going to fall the whole time and I'm sweating and, okay, what am I going to do about it? So you have to come up with an action plan and work on a goal where the two of you can be working together. And then once you've got that, you've got some control over this feeling, right? And I'm pretty much guaranteed that feeling of resentment, well, it may always be there, right? But it's, instead of it occupying this much space, it's only going to occupy this much space. And it gives you more room to work with some other feelings and make a more positive impact, and your relationship is going to be sustained. So one additional note here on a personal level, like I mentioned at the beginning, I had a lot of resentment issues, and I'm going to give you an example of what I would do. I know I'm not alone, so I'm going to own up to it. My husband would be really ill, let's say either pre or post going into the emergency room, right? So, of course, I feel terrible for him, and I'm sad and I'm scared, but I think, well, I know now that my underlying feeling was resentment. I want my life back. I want my husband back. I thought we were going to go to the store today or the beach today, and now we have this. And so what would I do? I would like go for a walk or go ride my bike and just leave him. I need time alone, but in that time I was brewing, and if I had been using my time constructively, it would have been a different outcome. What he needed was my support and my presence, and not really do anything, just be there and be honest and not be cold. My resentment led to being distant, cold, closed off. I wouldn't talk to him about how I felt. I was just, push the situation aside and, went on with my life. And that wasn't the right way to do things. Over time, when I worked through it, I recognized the feeling. I'm resentful. What do I want? Why was I resentful? Because I wanted to spend the day with him. And I wanted to do whatever it was. Let's say I thought we were going to go to the beach, or, we didn't get to do that. So then instead I chose to isolate myself from him and pout about it and go off and do something and then come back and still be angry. And what I did instead was what I learned to do instead over the course of time and many failures, and what has now led to us being closer than ever, through all these episodes, was to recognize his need and my need were the same. Where were they the same? That we wanted to be together. We needed each other. So I had to make a little bit of a compromise in how I was going to spend my day with him. And yeah, I'm not going to, lay in the bed with him while he was feeling sick all day, because that's not how I want to spend my day, but a portion of my day, and talk to him about how I felt and listen to his needs, and then move on and do something else. That way there's still a connection being made. I wasn't avoiding the situation. I wasn't overly focusing on the thing, which therefore created more of it. So if I focus on the fact that I'm feeling resentful and woe is me, the more of it there is. Instead, I recognized it, put it in a little box, then went and worked with my feelings directly with my husband, spent time with him there, continued to build a relationship in a different way, and then move forward. And, I'm not a mental health expert, but I've done a lot of work for myself and I've seen this work for people. So it's just a recommendation to try if you're a caregiver and you get stuck in a feeling. These are the steps. Recognize, do the work, figure out what you can do with it. So you have it, you're going to keep having this feeling. What do you do with it? And third, focus on the goal here, being to maintain the relationship with the person that you are caregiving for. That could be your mom, your sister, it could be your neighbor, it could be someone that pays you to be their caregiver. You do not want to be in a situation where you are a caregiver and you are constantly in a state of just, why am I doing this? How much longer can I do this? How much longer? I mean, we have that in the back of your mind sometimes, but you don't want it to be the driving thought, right? So I hope you found this encouraging, and like I said, I encourage you to check out the Facebook group, which I really should know the name for. I'll put the link. I've changed it a couple times, but it is Caregivers. If you go into Facebook groups and you search Caregiver or caregiving, you will come across Caregivers, Therapeutic. That's me. I'm going to put the link here and you'll see it. And I just created it, and I'll be putting weekly videos in there for people to check out so that they can, get some support. And there's also a podcast, which is what you're listening to. This is just the video recording. So this is via YouTube, and also the podcast, and a website is in development specifically to support caregivers with educational pieces. So I look forward to sharing that with you as we go forward. It's taking some time, but I'm absolutely loving it. So thank you for your time, and you all have a great week.